Ollie, thanks for joining us today. Great to see you here in person and just have this kind of important discussion. So just be good to hear a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Ollie. I'm a functional medicine practitioner and I run a clinic called OJ Health. And it's all been primarily focused, I suppose, for the last year or two, just really going down the men's health route. My own journey myself with how physical health impacts your mental health, journey with low testosterone, fertility and things, that aspect side of things has really allowed me to step into, I suppose, my client's shoes and know what that feeling is actually like when they come to you and I'm tired, I struggle with sleep, I struggle with mood, struggle with anxiety, and seeing what comes up on blood tests to actually push their testosterone levels back up in an ideal world. And it all started, I suppose, when I was 15, my dad died. And wow. He seemed healthy, didn't really drink, he was just stressed. And it wasn't that, and people say, like, sorry to hear it and things, but I wouldn't be doing this if he didn't die, because that pushed me down the route. He had migraines, he then had a stroke, 47 years old. I went down to the majorly obese route, to then competing in bodybuilding, to then working in nutrition with performance nutrition with Olympic athletes, Tour de France. But it wasn't until working with some entrepreneurs, we were just having a conversation about some people in America, and one of the guys, I was lucky to work with a guy who he was Taylor Swift's first manager, Rick Barker, and I was in his house and we were in Nashville doing a musician's health course, and he said that, Ollie, you've given me back my wife back what she married 10 years ago. And I'm just like, wow. But his 15-year-old daughter and 13-year-old son were there. And I'm thinking, I couldn't help my dad, but I could help these people. Mm-hmm. And that's where it spiraled into what we call functional medicine. Sure. Of like going down that route, which is crazy to think it's been 9-10 years now of working in that aspect. But it all really just escalated more when my daughter was born. She's coming up to a year old now.
Amazing.
So you think you know your client, right? And you think, I know what it's like to be this man with this low physical health, low testosterone and so forth, and needing to get those numbers up. But when you're actually given a child and you've got that child in your arms and you think, I've got to protect her. I've got to be in the best shape in order to grow up and grow old, because I turned 40 this year. Mm-hmm. My dad was 47 when he died. Is that I've got to bypass that. And absolutely. I got a little bit of stick for what I said, but I stand by it, is that you can't get healthy for your children. You never will. Mm-hmm. And I'm on a mission now of like helping guys to really just step into their potential, stop procrastinating and really push things forward with their health.
I love it. Very mission, purpose driven, which I think is, I think that's the key thing as well.
Absolutely.
Especially in this day and age, having that kind of lived experience that you have, being able to translate all of those experiences that you've had personally as well as through clients as well, finding your own kind of purpose again and trying to pass on that message. I think that's fantastic. So a little bit about myself. So Dr. Johnny Andrews, so working as the medical director at TEDS Health. TEDS Health, we're one of the UK's first remote digital online providers for certain mental health services, including testosterone replacement therapy, so TRT. We'll talk a little bit about that, because I know there's some overlap with some of what you do. And my journey is obviously with a background trained as a medical doctor, working across acute medicine, emergency medicine, still work part-time in the NHS in the emergency department. Worked in life sciences doing early phase research, phase 1 to 3 trials, which was very interesting. Taught me the importance of placebo, as we spoke about earlier coming in, and I think that can't be underestimated. I think there's a lot, obviously we talk, and we'll talk about this more when it comes to medications and even supplements, what actually happens at a receptor level to cause a physiological response. But I think what a lot of people, and all types of clinicians and non-clinicians are probably equally guilty, is there's a huge impact from just psychological factors, or just simply kind of what one is thinking or believing, and how that can actually impact actual processes in the body. So mindset and sort of state of mind as well. So, but more lately been working in kind of a range of startups and scale-ups, doing a bunch of things. A lot of it is in the proactive preventative space. I've worked as a clinical director and set up labs and diagnostic providers around the time of COVID and afterwards, doing a lot of stuff in kind of the home care space as well. part of my kind of big mission is trying to make things, putting things in people's homes, enabling people to do self-care more. I mean, there's care and there's also healthcare, being more proactive about it, bridging the world of what is kind of wellness with what is more traditional evidence-based medicine. And I think there is a huge overlap. I think there's a lot of blurred lines, a lot of confusion, sadly, a lot of misinformation, conspiracy theories. But I think the society is changing. I think what people are looking for and how they access the information is very different to going back 50 years ago. People who would have traditionally only gone to see a doctor as the gatekeeper. I mean, in the UK, we're very familiar with kind of GPs being that first person. And if you don't get, necessarily referred on or started with a treatment plan or investigation with a GP, that's the end of the road for a lot of people. Yeah. And then they try alternative providers. And we'll talk about it in a bit, but we know that there's a whole spectrum as well in the alternative space. And I think there can be ones that are definitely much more evidence-based and credible. And I think there are ones that are, frankly, not as well. But again, it's a marketing-driven world, and it can be really hard to distinguish. I mean, we were talking about social media earlier, but I look at a bunch of things, and it's getting harder and harder to distinguish what is actually credible and what isn't. Companies branding or individuals, again, with a bit of time, effort, marketing, and money behind, anyone can look professional.
Yeah.
You can even fake podcasts as well these days, right? Absolutely. With AI avatars. So I think it's a really interesting and exciting time. It's great to be working in this space and trying to impact people's lives to be healthier, to be better, to live better, to enjoy and get more fulfillment out of life. And again, from my angle, doing it as a doctor, obviously that's kind of what I have always been working in and wanting to do. But even I'm kind of reframing how I go about that. For me personally, I've seen that one-to-one care that I still do a bit of in the NHS and privately is really rewarding. Being able to talk to patients is great, but it's not very scalable. I leave off in a shift and I say, okay, I've seen 12 people and signed this and looked at that, 20, 30. I've impacted some lives, but I have worked on protocols and things for much bigger companies that have gone on to serve 1 million patients in a year. So if I look at kind of the impact and what I'm kind of doing, where do I want to focus my attention and where can really ultimately do better for society? So that's kind of a big focus for me. But digging into kind of, I think, a common point, so obviously at TED's Health, Men's Health, and you've mentioned that. I'm kind of keen to maybe dig it a little bit deeper. You've obviously covered the background story. For you, what do you think is one of the biggest underserved health issues with men right now?
I think it's based on something that you touched on about being in preventative medicine. So many times we're so busy as a society that we end up that we get fully sick, right? And I was showing you the blood work and the things that I do where we have conventional markers and then we have what I look at functional markers being optimal places. But people don't get their actual health checks done, even though a lot of people are actually paying for them already on their health insurance. And whether that's because they forget, they procrastinate because they might actually show something that they then can't argue with if it's there in black and white. But we are, and I've been guilty of it myself, of pushing our health to the side because we'll have that deal with it later mentality, or we have this savior complex, like a superhero complex, where we have to put everyone else first. And then we stress ourselves out, and then we hide the fact that we're waking up during the night, or we see things as normal that are actually common, like the waking up during the night, and then everyone is going to sleep scrolling through YouTube, so they think that's the way people get to sleep. I had someone tell me on a reel the other day that I'd put on about people waking up through the night, and this person said, it's ironic that I'm scrolling through YouTube watching this at 2 a.m. Yeah. I'm like, stop scrolling through YouTube at 2 a.m. then. That our brains are so switched on, and we find it hard to switch off. We find it hard to just sit there in silence. And I can't remember what the study was, but it asked a certain amount of men about sitting in silence for 15 minutes or having an electric shock. And more guys actually chose the electric shock because sitting in silence with your own thoughts was actually quite scary and quite worrying. Yeah. So being there, being able to actually meditate or just breathe or pray or whatever it is that you want to do in that silence. But our mind is racing so much. And a lot of guys don't talk about it, which then we look at suicide rates, and suicide rates are some of the highest they've ever been. The most at-risk demographic in the Western world is guys in their 40s.
Yep.
And it's not about male versus female, men versus women, male versus female. It's that we've pushed women's health so much, and there's so much knowledge about women's health that we don't want to take that down, because there needs to be more knowledge about it.
Agreed.
More knowledge about perimenopause and about postmenopause and everything and all that side of things. But men's health has kind of been pushed to the side. And we talk about andropause. And I've had conversations with clients, and they've asked their medical professional, how can they get some support with andropause? And that medical professional has come back and said, what is it? And you say about it, we don't want to say male menopause necessarily, because we know it's over a much longer period.
Yeah.
If we actually see the signs, we can do stuff about it. And I feel one of the biggest problems is education of men's health. I was listening to a lecture on the way up here, and it's an American one, and it was saying about guidelines to actually meet insurance, so they can actually get TRT on insurance.
Sure.
And only 11% of the guys that have symptoms would actually qualify to have it under insurance. They'd have to pay privately.
Sure.
So I feel there's the aspect, and why we're not seeing people being tested for testosterone or anything like that, I don't know. It's this worrying that it has to get so extreme before people do something about it.
Yeah, totally echo everything you've said. I think there's, again, I think it's very important to say that we don't dismiss women's health as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's sometimes when I've got even a bit of kickback or comments from even close people who know what I do in sport, what I do, but say, okay, and are you saying that women's health isn't important? I think that's not the case. I think both can be equally as important.
Absolutely.
And I think, as you say, because the focus has shifted, and rightly so, because again, historically it wasn't very focused towards women, that it's very important that things don't get neglected and swept under the carpet, because, as you say, men historically and even today are very bad at communicating.
Yeah.
So, and are very good at just putting a stoic, sort of unemotional, stiff upper lip response, attitude, facade, which means that everyone could assume, rightly or wrongly, that leave them alone. They're fine. Okay, they're not complaining about it. Therefore, they've been given the space. And I think there's been a lot of initiatives. I mean, I've seen it. So I'm 37 and a half or so. So I guess in my lifetime, I've seen probably various transitions. And I think over the years, things have now become more and more agile in society. I think the world is going through sort of so many changes now with AI and tech and kind of what's going on at a geopolitical level, that we're so used to constant change.
Yep.
But if you go back 10 years, I think the men's health narrative wasn't so strong, and it was probably dismissed. And then maybe in the last 5 to 7 years, that's become stronger and it's become more obvious. I think COVID and the pandemic around it's not the virus itself, but everything around what COVID did to society on a global level shifted everything that we know. Yeah. I mean, I think health is very, one of the biggest impacted things in how we view our own health, because COVID was a health pandemic. Okay. But I think, ways of working, so remote work from home versus working in an office or an employer, working for yourself, starting your own business, being more creative, realizing that, there was a massive, I think, distrust as well with kind of governments and providers. And I think, sadly, that also came across into health and healthcare professionals and WHO and guidelines and pharmaceutical companies and all of these things. And I think that creates so much confusion. There's obviously been a rise of kind of influencers. I think influencers aren't all bad or all good. I think there's a whole spectrum again. And I think they're credible players, companies and individuals in there. But there is so much noise. And I think one of the things I just want to come back on is you mentioned about kind of switching off. I think it's so hard because of how society is now wired. Social media, again, we bring it up again, but it's addictive algorithms. it's obvious that tech companies would make these addictive because they
meant
need
to
to
be
keep.
addictive, yeah.
It's meant to be.
They want to keep
right?
you on there.
But that's a trap. And it's no surprise that we are, as a society, and that's men and women and everyone, struggling to focus. I mean, that translates all the way down from adults all the way down to children, right? And who knows what the future generations are going to have to deal with because of all these kind of changes that are happening. So I think biology is kind of evolving because of what's been in front of our eyes through screens. And that is going to change ever more because of wearables and more products that we're going to start using. And what seemed sci-fi with implants and brain chip interfaces and all that is becoming more of a reality. Every few weeks I'm seeing more and more updates, and there's new companies raising money, doing trials and exploring and iterating. And I think fast forward 5, 10, 20 years, the world will be very, very different. But yes, coming back to men's health, I think it's important that we kind of keep championing that kind of narrative and ensuring that people aren't lost behind where kind of society's moved on and focused on other things. And actually, there's still this quiet but large cohort of society which is just getting overlooked.
Yeah, and we see it, I suppose, in the medication side of things with TRT, when the example that we had is that trying to get TRT on the NHS is very hard. Very hard. And even when we look at the way it's managed on the NHS isn't what people would potentially do in a private clinic. But when we look at HRT, which is TRT,
yep,
but people see HRT as women's. My daughter, as I said, year-old in a month's time.
Congrats.
We went for it's crazy how quickly that's gone.
It does go fast.
We went for the 12-week health check, and then my wife, because of her age, was told, do you want to go on HRT? No blood work, just because of her age, she's just had a child. And I just look at that and you think, we're seeing guys with so many symptoms not able to get the medication, but then there's this kind of stigmatism about it where TRT is steroids. And if we look back 10, 15 years, testosterone was just with bodybuilders. And it was about building muscle, not about mental well-being, not about allowing you to have good energy. It was about, we're going to get jacked. It was going to be build muscle and everything like that.
Yeah.
And it was, you would get it from an underground lab or something rather than having
gels.
All the side effects, all the extra things that go on top of it. So I had someone actually say to me the other day that my wife doesn't want me to do TRT. And I thought, why not? She said, first off, I don't want needles in the house. Okay, well, you can use cream. And yes, there's as we had the conversation about with cream transferring to kids or to family members and so forth. So it's making the best choice for you. But she was actually on HRT herself.
Right.
And I said to him, how would she feel if you pulled away her HRT, which was a thing that was supporting her right then, whether she was doing the lifestyle interventions or not, or things as well, but she was having that HRT that she was having support her actual hormones that she should be having in her body. How would she feel if we said, you're not going to take them? And that's what people are doing to guys because of this testosterone being seen as a steroid, when actually it is needed.
Yeah.
And we see testosterone dropping in a lot of guys from like 25 onwards, right? And I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm seeing more guys in their early 30s with low testosterone. It used to be 50s and 60s, but like early 30s when we look at chemical exposure, mold, like other toxins, environment,
toxins,
stress from social media, from having to look a certain way. People are then potentially going down the actual steroid route and screwing up their hormones. So much pressure, so much stress. And then even lower activity levels. We look at obesity through puberty, then that's signs of lower testosterone further down the line if they've got higher body fat and obesity during puberty. And
the metabolic syndrome and diabetes.
Exactly, yeah, not just testosterone. There's all the knock-on effects, and then they're on multiple medications as a result. It's worrying to see those trends. And a lot of times people think, it's just scare tactics. They're trying to sell something. They're trying to sell TRT. They're trying to sell coaching or whatever it is. But when we see that in clinic day in, day out of these trends on blood tests, on people just coming in, I don't know if you feel the same, but it's worrying to see what used to be 20, 30 years down the line is actually happening to these guys, like 20s and 30s.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So I think there's I mean, so many important things to kind of unpick there. But I think if we look at kind of research and kind of data that's available, looking at kind of the median testosterone levels of men, say in their kind of 40s, over the last few decades, it has gone down. And again, I think there's a few factors here. There's variables. There's kind of maybe even some sample bias as well.
This is also in a time when we've got more technology to check our health, so we should be more on top of it, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's a key point. I think because we have a much greater abundance of all types of testing and diagnostics beyond testosterone and hormone health, so just across the spectrum of health, and wearables and vitals, and every parameter it can be captured, right? We have actually too much information, and I think this is ultimately where we do need AI and tools to interpret it, right?
That sort of thing,
100%. But I think we never have a greater moment now to then be able to leverage all of that and history and data and actually be able to do stuff at a personal level rather than at a population level. And I think that's a really important distinction, because historically, and this is again for my kind of industry as in healthcare professionals, so clinicians, doctors included, as well as kind of policy makers, so people working at government levels to influence healthcare systems, the NHS in the UK and other healthcare systems across the globe. They always look at kind of greatest good for the greatest number, minimizing harm, safety, efficacy, and evidence as well. It needs to have some robust data behind things, and that data takes time. Decades. Again, if you look at kind of pharmaceutical trials, they're very long. And I think we are now getting to the point where speaking about what may be broadly safe and broadly efficacious, so could work for a particular demographic, so men, is not actually necessarily going to be good for you and I. Maybe good for you and I, or vice versa, or neither of us. And I think that's because we're not being personalized enough. And I think, again, we've got an abundance of stuff with genomics and every other kind of variable that we can for, that it will take time. But I think everyone will get to a point where we get a much more personalized plan in place from a health perspective, from a general life, diet and all these, as we say, the pillars of functional medicine. And I think you touched on that. So I guess my next question to you, given your background, is to maybe go through those and unpick them a little bit more in relation to men's health, because I think that at every level that we can probably find some causes why that impacts men's health now in 2026, but it didn't maybe in 1980. And I think that these variables stack as well. So poor sleep plus poor nutrition plus minus toxins could be synergistically worse for you than just having one out of whack.
I mean, I go slightly different with the pillars, like with regard to when we look at functional medicine, like the standard traditional pillars. There's 4 that I use in my clinic. And the first one is nutrition. Because nutrition, what we're putting in our body is all good. And people say you are what you eat. And then there's the you are what you eat and can actually absorb and not excrete. But your gut health has to be at a pretty good level. And it's being smashed left, right and centre by the poor sleep, by alcohol, by medications, like NSAIDs and stuff like that. Antibiotics. So all these things that maybe we will need at certain points, but maybe we don't need, because we could have done things at different levels. But if we don't have good gut health, we can't absorb the nutrients. Then we get things like reflux come along, and then whether people need the medication or not for that aspect, we're then messing around with our ability to absorb those nutrients and then get the raw materials to create good hormones, not just testosterone, but other hormones as well.
So the building blocks and the foundations, essentially.
So we need to have good gut health. And then we could go down the social media route as well, but my business is all on social media. So again, like, I'm supportive of social media. It's a necessary evil for the business. And I always say to people as well, question what I say, question what you say. You're a doctor, question what everyone says and do your own research as well.
Sure.
I always do that. But if like we look at social media, we'll then be, like, I'll probably be targeted on the train home by some probiotic company because I've said it here and my phone's over there and it's probably listening. But gut health isn't just get a probiotic. It isn't just get a yogurt with probiotics in, and we look at carrier methods in there and how they're going to get to the gut and whether they're going to be used. It's also looking at prebiotics and postbiotics, and then also looking at, is your gut lining compromised? Is your breath always smelling? Is there some like small intestinal bacteria overgrowth or candida or leaky gut and all these other things going on? So we need to have good nutrition to have good gut health, to be able to absorb the nutrients for those raw materials. But sleep, I feel sleep as the second pillar is so important because we're sleeping less and we're more stressed in the time we're awake anyway. And then we have caffeine in there, and I love a coffee, but it's essentially borrowing energy from tomorrow to fuel today. And we have more and more of those, and then different energy drinks and everything. It's like we're trying to grab more energy from firing up our adrenals that we need to recover from. Plus,
we're running an overdrive, but getting the problem down the road.
And then we're training harder. Like, I look back at competing in bodybuilding, and then I was working for a company that we used to call Complete Human Performance. We used to do a thing called hybrid training. I was a coach for them. So we would have people do ultra marathons and powerlifting meets in the same weekend. Like both extremes.
I don't think I've heard of that. But
yeah, it's like crazy. It's hybrid training. And like we'd have people do like 3.5 hour marathons and then like deadlift like 2.5, 3 times their body weight.
And how did that work out?
You basically take like away a lot of the, what we're classing rubbish. It's needed in a lot of the times, but you won't have as many recovery runs and you won't be doing bicep curls, stuff like that. We'll do the bare minimum, focus on recoveries, focus on nutrition, but they're extremes. You're not going to get many people with like 4 kids going and do them. They're going to be people with a lot of time to recover, but there's a lot of stress put on there. And we're still getting that with dopamine release. We look, is your training bringing a dopamine release? Things like high rocks and things like CrossFit, and same with like pushing yourself hard in bodybuilding. I don't want to demonize CrossFit and high rocks and things. Same with, it used to be, and it still is hard to run a marathon, but the thing is to run an ultra marathon. How hard can we physically push ourselves? And that's hitting us
more and more extreme, isn't it?
So it's like that touches on the third pillar, but the second pillar being sleep is that it's become normalized to wake through the night, to go to the toilet once, twice, 3 times. The amount of times people say to me, I have good sleep. Okay, let me have a look at your Oura Ring, your Whoop or whatever, and there's 2, 3 wakes during the night. But you're waking up multiple times. Yeah, but I get straight back to sleep. Like, okay, but you're not really getting into the deep and REM levels of sleep, and we're not getting enough sleep cycles in there, so we're not getting the restoration in our body. But a lot of testosterone is pretty certainly created when we're sleeping, right? So if we're not getting those cycles,
and the release of it, absolutely.
And there's a study that showed that in just 2 weeks, 6 hours of sleep can lower your testosterone. This is guys over 30, can lower your testosterone by 10 to 15%. That was total testosterone.
And it disrupts, I mean, your circadian cycle gets disrupted, cortisol goes up, and there's a kind of impact there, as well as also in your general kind of glucose sensitivity as well, which again is interrelated. So like all of
insulin resistance comes in everything as well.
So it's not just one thing, it's more.
So we're having problems with sleep. We're then waking up at different times. We're sleeping at different times. So we're essentially socially jet lagged. When we look at your master clock, your suprachiasmatic nuclei, like actually just saying, everyone go, and telling all your circadian rhythms, is to like 200 circadian rhythms in the body, something like that, or like organ clocks and so forth. They've all got to start at the same time. But if we're starting one day at 8 a.m. and then 9 a.m. and then 6 a.m. and then going to sleep at different times, it doesn't know whether it's coming or going. And I describe it as, like, I come from a music college background, and when you're creating music and you've got different stems there, so you've got different levels, like your drums, your keys, your strings, if you put them all at different tempos and stuff and start at different times, doesn't sound good. Doesn't sound good at all. Even worse when you've got ADHD going on. It's crazy. But that's what happens when we sleep and wake at different times. Then the training, so many times people are pushing for cardio and they're not doing any strength, and they're pushing for strength and not doing any cardio. If we've got poor cardiovascular fitness, it doesn't have to be that you can run a marathon, but if you are going to get out of breath going up the stairs, we probably need to work on that.
Yeah.
And I feel that we should at least be able to like do like 10 pull-ups, for example, or like be able to do like deadlift our body weight.
Is it?
Like be able to pick ourselves up off the floor. And we look at a marker of like longevity. Quad strength comes into play, right? It's like my wife's granddad died last year, and he was 102.
Oh.
But the last 2-3 years of his life,
that's impressive.
last 2-3 years of his life, he was basically in a bed in a chair because he could not lift himself up. And so many times people, their rate of all-cause mortality like goes up after they've had a fall after 60, which is crazy to think about.
It
Like
is.
we need good strength, and it's not to be massive or anything, but you have to have good strength and cardio fitness. But that fourth pillar, I feel, is people miss it a lot, is actually doing blood work. And they'll spend hundreds on supplements that they may not need, rather than spending 150, 200 pounds on a good blood
Comprehensive panel
to see what's going on. Not even necessarily looking at, there's like the metabolomics test from Genova, which tests a lot of nutrient deficiencies. Actually goes deeper into the actual B vitamins and magnesium and so forth, but just a full blood panel that looks B12, folate, vitamin D, for example, or looks at a full cholesterol panel to see, is your LDL raised, but your triglycerides are normal? Something must be going on to raise those triglycerides.
Yeah.
Is your ferritin raised?
Correct.
Like iron isn't actually high. Like, why is that raised?
Yeah,
And
so it's that inflammatory rather than actually being normal iron levels or
and then we see so many gaps that people will take these supplements. I've got low energy. I'll take some like NAC, NAD+.
too easy to do.
Yeah.
We're marketed to
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. So
the
like,
solution rather than the root cause.
Yeah. And we're speaking about ads and stuff like that. And like, we want to do it. We want people to get hooked in, to then listen to our content, to trust us, to buy stuff. But then we're also being frustrated with other people doing it, like, and they're doing it well. I've had people with like 20 different supplements, and I ask them when they come on board, why are you taking each supplement? And so many times people don't know, I just saw that could help me. And actually probably doesn't, apart from hits, like even the placebo effect isn't happening on it, and it's just hitting their wallet.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I mean, again, so many different ways we could go down. So not trying to take us down a rabbit hole, but so we use the term in medicine polypharmacy, multiple different medications or drugs at the same time. But I think that's true of beyond actually regulated medicines, that, you know, including supplements. And I think there's so many. I mean, you think of all kind of longevity agents, right? Peptides, all everything that's being marketed to us. And I think beyond the sort of bio agents or biopharmaceutical agents and supplements, there are also other types of therapies that are more protocolized based, you know, like red light therapy. We spoke about cold plunges or ice baths, and I think, and again, those are sometimes trying to trigger something internal, you know, to either disrupt or regulate a certain process or pathway. And I'm curious kind of how your journey's evolved over the years. Obviously, in your kind of your studies and work with clients and focus on the functional aspect and the pillars we've mentioned. And bringing that together, I'd like to ask the question, what are the protocols, so maybe not medications, not supplements, that you are seeing that are actually valuable for men trying to optimize their general health? Not only hormonal, just general health.
I suppose the biggest way that things have changed is that when I first started in here, before you got the experience in functional medicine, everything was a protocol, but that was a protocol based on supplements. Now, I would get frustrated with someone coming to me and they're on 10 different medications. If I then go and put them on 10, 15 different supplements, I'm doing exactly the thing I don't like Western medicine doing. But it's just supplements, so it's deemed as okay. But actually, they're then having to pay for everything as well, and it's more expensive. So it's looking at how I've changed as a practitioner, is that what can you actually do physically to use the minimum amount of supplements? Maybe 4 or 5 supplements max, and some of them will be like a vitamin D or like a methylated B complex or B12 methylfolate, EPA like a fatty acid, and maybe some adaptogens, some ashwagandha or a blend, and trying to get them onto a place where they can have a really good multivitamin, and then we adjust as we need to. And back and forth doing different testing through the year to see how we can start to optimize.
Testing and looking at which biomarkers, so bloods? Or
looking at bloods.
Other variables.
And also, if I'm going to do a test, I want to know how that test is going to change how I'm going to treat that client. Because it's all good doing a gut test, but if I know that that gut test is, say, 350 pounds, and that there is a supplement that we would probably use from that, which costs 100 pounds, and that will 100% tell us if that was the problem or not, or like, why not I just use that supplement? Because the test is going to take a month to come back anyway, or 3 weeks to come back. So we get that supplement in a couple of days, and we can pretty certainly know that we're going to have to use that supplement if that test comes back positive for whatever we're looking at. There's not going to be any harm in actually using this, apart from if it isn't that.
Is it?
We've spent £100, not £350. And it's looking at what's the quickest and easiest way that's going to fit into that person's lifestyle. But there's been more of a push on the sleep side of things. Sleep being those foundations of health, and how people can fit nutrition. I used to go from, like, when I was back personal training and then going into performance nutrition, it was more about the specific macros, the specific amounts of foods. And I'm working with pro athletes, whether they finish first or last is whether they can pay their bills or not. So of course, you've got to be really obsessed with that stuff.
Yeah.
But now I'm working with people that are running multiple businesses, have got multiple kids, and they don't want to weigh out 100 grams of chicken or whatever.
It's not also feasible as well.
Exactly.
Even if you want to do it,
Yeah.
it's kind of the practicalities of it.
And like, people are traveling, they're going for restaurants. What's the best option that they can have? And what are the things they have that are going to make the most difference or have a negative impact? Are they aware of how much alcohol they're having and why are they drinking? And I think that's a big thing. People are drinking because society sees it as normal. Dry January happens, and I ask people that are doing dry January, how do you feel at the end of dry January? I feel great. So why did you get wasted on the 1st of February? And it always happens all the time.
Yeah.
And we're not aware of these things that are actually going on in our head. So I think that my way of working has changed a lot, because I'm not afraid to ask those questions now. But before I was afraid, because you might get a negative response.
Interesting.
I put something up, and it was just before Christmas. I'm like, there's me just doing bicep curls. I'm like, I got some good lighting on there. But I'm doing bicep curls, and it was alcohol, pros and cons. Like, there was a reason I put that up on like the 21st of December or something. And it got thousands of views.
I'm sure.
And there's people saying, oh, you put this up just before Christmas. Exactly. Like,
Deliberately so.
We want some awareness on it. And it's not to say don't drink. I don't drink. I don't like the taste of alcohol. If I did, I might have.
Did you drink before?
Not really. Like, when I used to produce and DJ, I used to always drive. So if I did drink, it would be few and far between, even when I was really obese.
But no 0% beers back then, I guess.
No, I'm like 40 this year, so that was back like 20 years ago. I remember going to a beer festival and like asking for something that tasted like Foster's. It was like that's like boring with beers. But I lost a lot of weight to compete in bodybuilding, and it's like 100 pounds in like a year or two, like 18 months. I didn't really drink much then, but it's still, we're not aware why we're drinking. We can cut back when society cuts back because everyone else is doing it. I think there's a fear of not fitting in.
So much FOMO.
Yeah.
And,
everyone else does it. So people, they do it the same. At our church, they've just had what they call Vision Sunday for the year. And then 3 weeks before, they were doing a fast. And it's the Daniel fast. I don't know if you've ever heard on it. It's basically like taking out a lot of the sugars, and it actually takes out meat in there as well. I'm not going to do a fast that takes out meat. I don't really eat much sugar anyway. So it's finding out something else you can fast on as well.
So you can choose what you...
Yeah, I mean, it's more about, I'm going to restrict something. So then I'm showing God that I'm like sacrificing something.
It's a bit like Lent and leading up to Easter, isn't it?
Yes. And, but they were doing it like that 3 weeks of like, okay, the Daniel fast is a big one just because in the Bible it was, the king was basically overindulging.
Okay.
Loads of rich foods, and then
gluttony.
Yeah. And when you took them out, they looked healthier. So you ask people when they're doing that, how do you feel? I spoke with our pastor, and how do you feel? And he said, yeah, I feel good. So are you going to keep doing it? Like, we just added the meat back in? Yeah, most of the time, apart from when I'm traveling. And
Okay.
so many people are worried about not fitting in. And I think that's a big part. So going back to that question of how things change, of like, we have to call people out with love as to why they're doing it, because a lot of people aren't aware of why they're doing it.
Just an interesting one, maybe a kind of freestyle thought on this is, you mentioned kind of church, there's a community which probably helps people to actually stick to something and then continue it. Because I think about kind of more commonly Easter, right? People do, if they're following that and then give something up, you have Pancake Day and then you try and quit something for a bit. And then you think about everything that's marketed in your face even throughout that period. I've actually seen it since Christmas, so probably about 2 weeks ago. Easter eggs were on the shelves in Tesco's.
Boxing Day.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Boxing Day?
Yeah, you obviously didn't have to go out to get some emergency baby formula on Boxing Day.
Yeah, I did not. Or emergency Easter eggs.
Yeah.
But then you think about kind of that concept, and it's like, I'm guilty as charged. My mother-in-law bought some mini eggs. She hid them somewhere, but I found them, and once I found them, it's got. I do like it.
You don't just have one mini egg.
But that's the trouble. It's a bit like Pringles. Once you pop, you can't stop. Those kind of jingles are in our brains for a reason, because we grew up in a time when that was marketed on TV, or they were sponsors of sports teams or events or whatever. It still is there to a degree. I think there is a shift now, as you say. We're going to travel home. Both of us are going to use the underground at some point, and we're going to be hit by a ton of ads. And I'd say, especially around January, February, there's a good percentage of those, up to 50%, are some sort of health or wellness focus, right? I think that's because typically people are trying to do a new year, new me regime type thing. So I think, but bringing back to what you said, so I think there's something to be said about community.
Yeah.
And I think in an era where we're more isolated, so actually, looking at stats, we spoke about kind of depression, and mental health and suicide, and especially in men, but general isolation and loneliness. We have a loneliness epidemic, actually. Yeah. It seems to be more prevalent in younger generations, but it's also has always been there in the older generations. And I think, not to say that nursing homes and places like that are the ideal place for people to spend their older years, but at least there is a community there, and people have touch points with carers and other peers, people of the similar sort of age, but many people are living on their own. And if we focus on lifespan, so elongating years, but sick years, and actually we end up with more people who are just probably isolated on their own, and very vulnerable, very dependent, and the only kind of interaction is a kind of care interaction, which is not what we would want for society. That's not how society thrives. So I think community's got a really big part to play.
There's actually studies though, right? Because your immune system is better if you've got a better community around you, because you're exposed to more bacteria. One of the problems that we had during COVID is that our immune system got really lowered a lot because we weren't exposed to as much bacteria. And so if we wanted to look short term, I'm sure there's some studies around it based on COVID, but there's studies that I've read that have been based on people that have more of a community feeling. Their mental health is better, but their physical health, when we look at their immune system through that exposure to bacteria, is better.
Totally. And I think it's probably multimodal in kind of what is causing what exactly, but there's quite a famous study, a Harvard study. Actually, I think it's looking at alumni, so people who studied in Harvard years down the line. One of the biggest findings was, I guess proxy markers of longevity, was connection and community. So, were people surrounded by people that they liked or loved, friends, family. I think that's the key thing, versus being isolated on their own. It's quite logical when you think about it, really.
There's something with the community aspect. And so with our daughter, we had to go through IVF. So I've had to use TRT after that. There were signs of low testosterone before I even used anything. But when I competed in bodybuilding, done 7 shows, one of them I actually used steroids. And then I couldn't get my testosterone back up again. But I had to use TRT, and we went through IVF. And I had to come off that TRT. Yes, we know there's ways of potentially keeping fertility, but because we were getting funded, I had to come off the TRT to do the IVF. And my testosterone dropped from between 20, 22-ish total testosterone.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty high if that was free testosterone, but total testosterone to 1.1. Started going up to 2.4 and then back down wasn't just the testosterone, but it was also the low estrogen that was the problem.
Of course.
Bones, joints hurt and everything. But it was very much the community that helped me through. My mental health was shot. I was waking up crying. I was doing very extreme client cases and being able to work for an hour a day. But my mental
Vicious cycle, basically. Yeah.
But you talk about community, and one of the things I say is that I don't want it to turn into a religious podcast or anything like that, but I started going to church like a year before I'd done that. And that community there was the community that got me through. Some people were checking in with me each day. And that is the thing that I didn't have that community before I went to church. So that helped me with my mental health. Mm-hmm. And before I then went back to private clinics or anything, and I wanted to go TRT with the NHS, they said you'd have to be off for another 2 years. I would not have been here. Like, even with that community, I feel that other 2 years, with a daughter, I'd love to think I wouldn't have done it, but I probably would have done something stupid and probably not have been here, because that low testosterone was horrible, really horrible.
And I think also, just to jump in on off the back of that, I mean, father of two young girls myself, so having gone through those early stages, we did have a pretty rough night last night. Actually, my youngest came in, I think, at 2 or 3 a.m. and multiple wake-ups then, but you get used to it, you get desensitized to it, and I'm in a kind of probably much healthier phase of my life than I was 2, 3, 4 years ago when we had our firstborn. But those early years, that first year, I mean, everything that we spoke about, pillars, you can probably put it out the window, right? Because even with the best intention, it is very hard. I mean, life is going to
adaptation, right? As you say, like, we go through it. However, like, I'm a person with myself. I dropped about 20 pounds in about 6-7 months after she was born, because people said, you're not going to be able to sleep. You're not going to be able to eat right. You're not going to be able to train. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. But it is about doing the best you can in the chapter you're in. Absolutely. If you go out and have 10 McDonald's a week or Burger King or Five Guys or whatever it is.
So emotional eating.
Yeah, you're eating because you're tired. It's still about how, if you've had 5 hours sleep, it becomes harder to be disciplined, but not impossible.
That's true.
And I feel that's where accountability comes in, and a community as well, checking in with people. So, but it's still, we are still in control of more things than we actually realize. We're not going to be getting the depth of sleep, so our hormones will be pretty certainly taking a hit. So do some bloods to see how bad they're taking a hit. And if they have taken a hit, then go and see whether you need to have TRT or whatever it is. Or is it something you can do supplement-wise? Is it something you can do with, you're not going to train 5 times a week, so train 3 times a week, whole body sessions, like adapt, because that's a chapter you're going through that is going to be a point when they start going to nursery, so it opens up a little bit more time. You probably have to work about 25 hours a day to actually pay for nursery, but finding that out now. But it's, you have to adapt in the season that you're in, and awareness is a thing that allows us to actually get through that, I think.
Yeah, I think I like that, seasons and awareness. There's a really, really good terms, because I think there's a seasonality in life, as well as obviously in the world, and even probably micro seasons as well, right? You could be in your spring phase of as some call it, between your 30s or so, and and then you could become a young parent, and that probably puts you back, and then you're going through maybe a disruptive winter as well.
Have you seen the evidence about low testosterone once your partner actually conceives? Your testosterone naturally drops.
Please tell us about it.
Yeah, so your testosterone naturally drops as your partner conceives, because testosterone is there for reproduction, right? And then you have to go into more of the nurturing.
Yes. So caregiving.
It does drop, but it doesn't drop massively, but it does drop. The problem is then at the same time as that dropping from conception to then baby being born, the guys with lower testosterone spend more time with their kids. It's crazy that is, like the testosterone's lower, there's more
sort of nurturing and bonding,
more oxytocin going on as well. And then the problem comes is that testosterone should go back up to normal, but then we start adding in the poor lifestyle habits,
which is so easy to stack.
And then we also feed into those habits as well, where actually I'm getting 5 hours sleep, but I'm also scrolling through YouTube, I'm also playing Call of Duty or whatever it is, or I'm also drinking alcohol, having loads and loads of caffeine.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle. One leads to lowers it more, then we need it more, and then lowers it more, and that's the thing that I feel we need to have more awareness of.
No.
It does drop, but should come back up, but drops and then suddenly does that because of the life, that chapter, that season that we're in. And it's hard. Like, both being parents, it is very hard, like having a child. And I've only got one.
And it's a marathon as well.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I've been through, as I'm sure you and everyone probably has, various different challenges. Whether it's studying and exams and work and various personal and professional challenges, but they're usually very time boxed and limited. They may be very intense. Poor sleep, focusing on something, really putting my all into it, whatever it might be. But there is an end goal.
Yeah.
And you then need a bit of time to decompress and rest and recover and recuperate, whether that's physical, whether that's mental, emotional, all of it. But with being a parent, that doesn't stop,
Yeah.
The end goal is maybe getting them to 18. I mean, it's debatable, or 16, where you draw that line, but there is always a new chapter, right?
Yeah.
We talk about newborns, and then you get to the toddler phase, and then you get beyond that, and there's always new challenges.
Yeah.
I used to think, oh, great, once they can speak and communicate, it'd be better, and actually, there's a different set of challenges that come, and there's always...
My thing at the moment is like, when she can play with Lego, I can play with Lego. And then my wife's like, no, it's not really going to work like that. You're not going to get her to play on the PlayStation more. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
get her a Switch.
But I think it's important. I think so the two terms that you just brought up. So I think seasonality is key, and optimizing for that season.
Yeah.
I think again we don't do that. We look at a population level and we just take an age as a number and a data point and assume that, as you said earlier, 30 you should have a normal testosterone level or whatever it might be, and guys under a certain age don't have this, or certain healthcare systems don't advocate for certain preventative tests before a certain age. And again, there's so many good reasons for that.
Yeah.
It's a cost benefit based on who the payer is, which might be the state, and how can we expand care safely and diagnostics without impacting negatively on the rest of the system. So there's so many factors at play here. But in the other key you said keyword was awareness.
Yeah.
And I think, again, this is kind of one of the things I'm so passionate about doing stuff like this, is because I think awareness has to be relevant to every level as well. I've heard and seen things, as I'm sure you have, which don't necessarily resonate for me, and there are certain things that I will, trust and take more seriously because it's phrased in a certain way, but it might be very medical jargon, which for someone else, a layperson, might not really acknowledge that. What do you think are some of the strategies we could do to raise awareness of issues we've touched on affecting men, and what can we do better?
I think guys talking about it. As I say, that I'm on this mission to talk to as many people, and us putting out content like this and do it regularly is a big thing that hopefully people will get something from. But speaking isn't always enough. We have to show, we have to show people that we're doing these things as well, that we've been through these things and we're going through these things. People try and hide things as well. Like last night, I had a therapy session of dealing with imposter syndrome and all that sort of stuff, and dealing with different routine changes. That it's not a weakness to know that we need support. Mm-hmm. And there's that, whether we have that like stoic mindset or that strong mindset or whatever that mindset is, I call it the David Goggins mindset of like, just do more and do more and do more.
Hustle culture.
Yeah, exactly. I have to be careful with hustle because one of my friends has got a business as a gym called Hustle, and I'm like, I don't want to, like, your gym's amazing, but like, I don't like the hustle culture. But it's that hustle, go harder, go harder, go harder. And we've got to realize that a strength is asking for help. That we shouldn't just try and push it all to the side. We're all going through different things. PTSD isn't just PTSD from someone who's been in a war and had bullets shot at them. There's people with PTSD that someone might look at that and think that's nothing to go through, but it's still had that physiological side impact on their body and caused PTSD.
Yeah. Huge traumas.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's dictated. Just because something's working for you doesn't mean it's going to work for someone else. So we have to take everyone as an individual in there. And I feel that when we look at the NHS, there's not necessarily the structure to actually do that as an individual because of the amount of pressure on the system. and the way it's set up. And then we look at the private aspect, is that a lot of people don't have the money to go to the private aspect where they can be treated as an individual. So we've got to get as much information out there as possible that people can relate to, but it's hard to get it onto different levels of like trying to speak to everyone. So I suppose it is just being open and honest.
Yeah, I completely concur with all of that. Slightly controversial one, but these are good conversations to have. So I'm kind of with you on the individualized approach. I'm with you on, I've grown up like you again, where again it's kind of do more, work more, whatever that might be, whether that's academically, whether that's kind of physically, whatever it might be. That was kind of bigger is better, go harder. That was the culture, hustle culture. And I think I've maintained a bit of that. I would argue that's probably led to some success that I've seen. So in an era where things are now actually saying, no, we need to be a bit better and a bit nicer and a bit kinder. And again, I'm all for that as well. Where is that balance? Because I'm at the risk of, coming across too woke, but like, where is that balance? Because resilience is actually being able to push through. And I think that is important. We often, myself included, I think everyone, unless you sometimes have somebody, an accountability person, whether that's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a parent or a peer, pushing you or giving you that motivation, you might not know actually what you can achieve.
Yeah.
And then you achieve it and you go, okay, now what else could I do? So I think there's so much positives from that. But if we take the approach that actually, no, we need to be a bit gentler on ourselves and no, you don't need to do that. Are we missing something? Where's that fine balance?
I don't know.
Without pushing
I'm in that same mindset as you, is that we do have to push ourselves and we have to get out of our comfort zone. But have we become too soft, as you say, and we're too comfy in that comfort zone and wanting everything, like just click a button to go and order some food rather than even actually go and have to get it. Even looking for medication that makes us lose weight or peptides that emulate exercise. Like when we look at mitochondrial response, we're looking for the easy way of doing it.
Quick fix, the quick win. Yeah.
And I get it. Like it's from someone that's being overweight. I understand what that feeling like is. Like you've lost weight and then suddenly you think, oh, I'm going to gain it all back, or that you're trying so hard and then someone offers you a takeaway and you're just like trying to say no, but you're salivating and you're like, I can't say no. And you get it. And then by the time you've eaten it, you're like, why did I do that for? But we have to take responsibility as well. Like not go too hard, but everything that happens to us is because of us. And if we can take responsibility for everything, which again, I'm still working on, even my daughter pulled my laptop off the table and smashed it at the weekend, but that's actually my fault because I left it with the charging cable off the table. So it's frustrating. She didn't mean to do it.
Of course not.
But take responsibility for that.
Clearly.
We need to do that with our health as well. We're blaming like everything else apart from being like, oh, I didn't get up when my alarm clock went up and I'm just gonna have an extra half an hour in bed, or I didn't stop Netflix when it had that auto next episode going on. And so I watched it till 11 o'clock at night and I'm so tired, I'm sick. Well, why are you sick? I had so much alcohol and junk food. Well, like, no wonder.
Yeah.
So it is, it's hard to say, where is that balance there? We don't want to push too hard, which we will then see when we actually look at testing, when we look at adrenal function and so forth. And we look at hormones and we can see that based on like testosterone then being able to go up for TRT when they're actually like sorting the stress levels out. They've been pushing too hard, but they still have to push themselves enough, which is, I say to people with training, is that you should be able to push yourself and not feel wrecked for the next 3-4 days. Whereas a lot of times people are overdoing it because we get that dopamine hit. And we talk about ice baths. We talk about when we get a dopamine hit, it goes up and it doesn't necessarily come down to baseline. It sometimes it does that. But we're getting dopamine hits all the time. Phones, likes, comments, shares on Instagram, the ice baths. Then we're going to the gym and we're working out with a dopamine hit. We're listening to our favorite music for a dopamine hit. We're then getting like, I don't know, pre-workout
stop stimulation.
Yeah, it's just constant and constant.
Yeah.
So we get back to what we started on about trying to switch off. It's so hard to switch off.
I think, and just coming in there, and something you said earlier about kind of the algorithm and, the autoplay on Netflix or whatever other providers are available.
Yep.
But like everything has been engineered and manufactured deliberately, again, some by tech companies and others, to really capture some of our inbuilt human responses and kind of manipulate them for a certain product, service, as benefit, right? Yeah. To make it more addictive. So it is that much harder probably in 2026 to not binge watch stuff than it was 20 years ago when actually it was terrestrial TV, or maybe you're lucky enough to have, cable or Sky or whatever it is.
But it's not impossible.
No, but it's not impossible. Yeah. So what is so given that it is harder, so that's one side of things. There's the external factors. There's internal factors like one's biology, your genetics. There are certain limitations. Not everyone is built the same. What would you say what's your blueprint? So we spoke about being individualized, and I think that's something that you're very passionate about as a doctor. Obviously, I treat, dealing with patients, going through diagnosis, management, so prescribing, it's at a personal level. But do you have a blueprint and an approach when you kind of take on a client and explore?
I do multiple questionnaires to look into what's going on, and obviously blood work to see where their stress levels are at, but it's getting to know a client. And I think that's where I would struggle if I was a GP, where you're getting like 10 minutes with someone, you might not then see them again. It's like, I build a relationship with someone stays with me like 3 to 6 months. I've had someone stay with me for 10 years, just constantly doing different goals for events and things, but they might not say something to me until like 3 or 4 sessions down the line, because they've then built trust up with me. Mm-hmm. So it's building that trust ASAP in order for them to trust you and to open up. Absolutely. To something that happened in childhood that you weren't aware of, but actually that's why they're not taking their supplements. Mm-hmm. They're constantly getting this trigger. I worked with someone and she was anorexic, and we spent ages trying to get her to actually start eating food, and like she was basically like, as she was brought up, she was pushed and pushed and pushed to run with her dad, and that caused her a lot of trauma, but she had to open up with that aspect. And it was like years and years ago, probably shouldn't have taken her on board, but I wanted to help everyone. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up getting a message from her mum saying, she's finished her sports science degree or something like that, and you were one of the only people that helped her through that. So it's great when you get those results, but I couldn't treat her like a guy that's got multiple kids. Like everyone is completely different. Yeah. And I suppose people also, I'll attract what I'm putting out there. So if I'm putting out the stuff talking about my history, my lifestyle, like the things that I've been going through, and be open about that, people will start to trust me more. So it
resonates or it doesn't.
It's a blueprint. It's just being me. I can't change who I am. I can't be someone different than I am online. So if I put out me, you get the clients that hopefully will resonate with that and get the results. Yeah. You'll get some people like the trolls and stuff, like, but it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's fascinating, just even hearing you speak now, as I know we've also spoken previously, is you work with both men and women as well. And we've spoken a lot about kind of men's health, masculinity, obviously your background as well, kind of bodybuilding, working in elite sport. So obviously I imagine quite a bit of your content would be focused on men. Mm-hmm. But yet still women are also coming to you for advice and coaching and support. So what do you think resonates with them?
Well, I used to put out a lot of content on women's health. However, I would be that one, it's like, you're a man talking about menopause. Yeah, I'm qualified. I'm not a woman, but I'm qualified and insured to do what I'm doing. And you'd always focus on that negative comment. There's like 50, 60 positive comments. But I feel it is that hormone issues, even though I'm talking about testosterone, I'm talking about sleep, and I'm talking about it from a men's health perspective, women are still going to see it as well.
Isn't it?
Some husbands will say about this stuff, and then the wives will be like, I need that. And yes, referrals from clients, that helps get more women on board. Yeah. And I feel that referrals are the most amazing clients, because you've worked with someone who has trusted you enough to refer someone that is maybe in their peer group or family member to you to then help them as well. And that's where I don't think I get as many female clients from social media as I used to when I was primarily putting that information out there, but I still get them, and then more from referrals now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's quite interesting is obviously we've been speaking about testosterone for men, but actually there's growing interest, growing recognition and awareness, and demand for testosterone for women.
Yeah.
So TRT for women. Curious on to hear a little bit about your experiences there, if at all any.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really manage the HRT aspect. I can see what we see on bloods and then ask them to go to their nurse or HRT specialist as such. But I've had people that have become massively estrogen dominant because they've been prescribed estrogen rather than any testosterone. And I would personally be looking at the testosterone, which I still don't believe it's actually tested like straight away with NHS. It's estrogen first, right? If they do any bloods.
Correct.
But they have estrogen cream or patch, but then the testosterone, a lot of the times they can actually benefit just from the testosterone before actually having the estrogen. So I feel it should be more normalized with it, just as estrogen is important for guys as well. And too many people then having aromatase inhibitors to then crash their estrogen, and they wonder why they've got like loads of brain fog and sore joints. And they're seen as male and female hormones, but they are both needed at differing amounts in men and women. So I think there needs to be more education in both parts.
I think that's you've hit the nail on the head. I think still, sadly, we refer to these as men and women's hormones, and the labeling, the semantics is still needs a lot of work on that. It's very interesting as well. I mean, so TRT for women, we're seeing a lot that might be now prescribed for libido. So kind of women who's struggling with that, but actually it has far-reaching consequences on impacting kind of brain fog and cognition and kind of mental function. So it's much broader than that. Keen to hear maybe just what would you say if you were trying to explain testosterone to someone who's listening and saying, yeah, but it still sounds so steroidy or TRT, I don't like the side of that. What would you say are the key benefits? And try and be as broad as it is, because I think, again, the preconception is just get jacked, more muscular. But
I feel if I was to explain it in one sentence before then going into about 3 or 4, it allows you to feel like yourself again. If you've become so gone down a pathway where you've started to veer off and veer off and veer off, and your energy's gone off, you're more tired than normal, your sex drive is a little bit lower, maybe your erections haven't got the quality that they used to have, and you're thinking, I'm just getting older, and you've been pushed by society that you are just getting older, and you're actually in your 40s, in your 50s, in your 60s, and you want to have some of that younger you back, at least get your testosterone checked and see if you actually need to have testosterone in there, because that's the thing that's going to help build the foundations that, along with those other things we have. But if we don't have that testosterone in there, we're getting marketed by things like peptides and stuff and other biohacking supplements and things, but a lot of them won't actually get the advantage that you need if you haven't got that foundation of testosterone in there.
I think that's a key thing. I think I like that you say testing, and I think a lot of people are sometimes quite critical to say, oh, every company is trying to sell me a diagnostic and test. But actually, given that you actually need that to be prescribed, it's so critical to the diagnostic criteria. If you don't have any testing, you're just running on a gut feel. And I have people who, and you must have seen that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my testosterone's quite good actually. Well, no, it's fine.
Testosterone isn't just whether you can still have sex. A lot of times that is the biggest symptom because we hear about it. But and just to one of the things to finish on is that I always say test, don't guess. If you don't need TRT and you can sort it, don't use TRT, because that's not a decision. You don't try TRT for 2 weeks. Because if you do it for 2 weeks, 2 months, and then you say, oh, it hasn't worked, you come off, you are going to be in a much worse position than when you started, because chances are you've shut your own natural production down. But don't just go and try it because someone down the gym has said, I'll go and take this, which chances are is a steroid dose rather than a TRT dose. And you'll do a lot more harm than good. So get tested, whether that's through Ted's help, whether it's through me, through whoever, get tested and see whether you actually need it before you even go into it, because you'll save yourself a lot more hassle and a lot more frustration in the longer term.
Absolutely. I think key things just to also round off on is get tested is important. The NHS, as excellent as it is, has slightly different criteria.
Yep.
So the cutoff is only on the total testosterone, which is about 8.6. And actually, typically, we're seeing that societies like the British Society of Sexual Medicine, the SSM, would be advocating for at least levels above 12 for non-diabetics, and pre-diabetics and diabetics to be at least 14. And so that's one angle. There's also the free testosterone as well, which is often not looked at. And again, we won't dig into all the other hormones, but that's digging into deeper on the hormonal basis. So it's actually making sure you have the right test. Because if you just get one total testosterone, GP said it was fine. Well, is it? Let's see what the actual numbers are. And also the other markers. So I think, again, we've had a lot of focus on testosterone and hormones, and again, that's obviously a lot of what we do at TED's Health, but it's not all what I do as a doctor, it's not all what you do. We look at the whole bigger holistic picture. If somebody is coming in with symptoms of just general tired, fatigue, brain fog, there could be other things. There could be nutritional deficiencies. Iron, Exactly. Iron, B12, folate, vitamin D, thyroid function. There's
could so be some infection going on in the white blood cells.
So if you don't,
and
there's that. Yeah. So exactly. So if you haven't looked at everything, if you're looking at things in isolation, you can't really build a comprehensive picture.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the key sort of take-homes for me is to get tested, get the right test, get the right expert advice and support.
Yeah.
I think it's the support as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's easy.
Cool. I would say andropause, it's a clinical term, right? And testosterone in some guys will drop between 0.4 and 1.4% from 25 years upwards. Doesn't happen in every single person, but in guys, it will drop usually around that amount without pushing to actually keep those numbers up and so forth. So it's different to when we look at menopause, where it's over a very shorter period of time. It's like an average of around 3 years.
It's off a cliff, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's like that rather than like that. And guys can have a lot more interventions in order to work through this if we actually intervene earlier, sooner rather than later. And I think there just needs to be a lot more awareness, because as we said in the start of this, it's not about men versus women. It's about menopause is this, andropause is this. They are both around hormones, but when we look at the duration and the time frame of each one, they are a lot different, and the interventions for each one are different.
So actually, for that reason, I'm not a big fan on the term andropause, because it sounds too similar to menopause, and actually it is very fundamentally different for all the reasons you said. So I think that's, again, the awareness piece, right? It's actually highlighting that there are big differences. It's not just wait till you're 50 and then your levels are going to drop.
Yeah.
Actually, it's much more subtle, gradual, and it's earlier onset in most cases. 30s, 20, in some cases less than 30 as well.
I would say an average male, once they get into their 30s anyway, definitely into their 40s, should be doing a full blood test every year. I like to do one every 6 months. Okay, that costs, but every year, at least doing a full blood panel to see where you're going, because there's also knowing your testosterone is, say, here. But was it here last year and it's gone down, or has it stayed very similar? What trajectory are you on? Because it could have been lower and you've implemented right and it's gone up. So just starting to get regular testing is going to help so much, and you know exactly where you are.
Solly, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. There's a big misconception sometimes between TRT and steroids.
Yep.
Help us unpick that a little bit.
TRT is testosterone replacement therapy. It's replacing where your testosterone should, in an ideal world, sit naturally. So when we look at markers of high and low, right, as we've said about 12 being the guidelines of being able to intervene medically, but like 29, 30 being the total testosterone of high, but sitting in those numbers. When we look at steroids, and I know so many people get their backs up when I say that, first off, Tren isn't TRT, Masteron isn't TRT. Like, steroids is then going to put other anabolic and androgenic like substances in there, and it's about getting super physiological higher levels, which is where a lot of the side effects that people hear about, enlarged prostate and things, and like a lot of higher estrogen levels, gynecomastia and stuff, that's where they start coming along.
Hematocrit and
exactly. And that's where it gets that bad reputation. So many people say that they're on TRT, but they're actually on steroid doses. And one of the reasons, and this is from someone that has used those doses, not massively high, but used those doses years and years ago now, it was like 2012, my last show, that people say that steroids aren't addictive. They are. You get used to that feeling of essentially being indestructible. So it may not be that biochemical addiction, but the feeling is addictive, especially for people with addictive tendencies. And that's where I feel the difference is. TRT 100% is not steroids. It's a medical intervention that hopefully you won't need. But a lot of guys, I saw a stat the other day that in the Western world, that the average 40-year-old has 13.7 nanomoles a litre total, which is worrying, because that's not going to just keep getting higher.
No. And I think trends are important, and I think that's the key thing. I think also the fact that it's replacement therapy, so you're replacing it to an optimal range. So that is a range that has a higher. It does have a minimum baseline you want to get to, and it's usually for people who are below that, and that's guideline driven, and it has to be also safe. People have to be screened to
and
be
symptoms as well, right?
And be symptomatic. But I think also the key thing is watching when someone is on replacement therapy, so TRT, checking those levels don't go too high, because I think commonly steroids, anabolic steroids, you're just trying to get as much as quickly in a short period of time to get those gains, optimizing for physique, for lifting, for competition, for whatever. So it's a very short-term view. And I think the key thing with TRT is it's a long-term thing. Again, as you said, it's not a treatment for 2 weeks. If you're looking for some sort of benefit in 2 weeks, which might be in one's sex life or something like that, there are other therapies and things to consider, right? So if erectile dysfunction is an issue, consider potentially erectile dysfunction medication, and there might be other variables there that might be contributing to that. It might not be just, well, let's get some steroids for 2 weeks and take that, because if anything, you're possibly going to do more harm. It has to be done responsibly.
There's also, when we look at TRT, it's getting into your optimal dose, as you say, and testing to see, because it can still change the levels in your blood, right? But gradually it'll change. So constant testing and trying to keep on that same dose. Maybe even lower it if you can get away with a little bit less. But with steroids, people end up doing these blasts and cruises, and that's where I think there's a lot of confusion, because people say they're going on a cruise and they're on like 250, 300 milligrams a week. And there's no start exactly on this level necessarily when it comes to TRT. Everyone has to take it individually, but maybe someone is saying 150 milligrams or 100 milligrams a week to start on. Again, this is not any individual advice, but that's not what people would be technically cruising on. And the amount of times I see it, bodybuilders are doing it more now, where they're doing bloods, but back in the day, people weren't really doing bloods. Been really good for able to chat from both medical professional, from functional medicine professional, and to see how we actually agree with a lot of the things, and to see that it isn't just always involving medical intervention. It's to see lifestyle can make a massive amount of difference. And I feel that we're going to have a lot more information to cover. And if people have questions from watching this, maybe send in some questions and we can answer them in future episodes.
Yeah, totally. I've really enjoyed this chat. And I think the key thing is I think there's so many synergies. And I think what's interesting is, yes, we've spoken about kind of specific tests and treatments, or alluded to that, but actually there's a lot more that is actually outside of the clinic, and outside of clinicians and experts and coaches. That is day-to-day life. It's habits, it's our environment, it's sleep, it's those key things that every human does on Earth. So, and I think the awareness is the key thing. Is my take home. Awareness, community, the importance of kind of humanity and kind of relationships and purpose. So yeah, I think lots for me personally to think about and reflect. Hopefully lots for people listening and watching this, and looking forward to more conversations like this.
Absolutely.